Welcome back in the series on how to build your own Spiritwalker. I'm Brandon, aka the Spiritwalker. In the first part, I showed you guys how to make these stilts and how to make them where they're very safe for you. In this next part, I'll be showing you how to make the front arms and the proper spacing for them as well. So check it out. These are the items you need. Crutches, some scrap thin aluminum, a variety of bolts, these 3D printed supports, and I'll show you how to do it without those as well. A full sheet of insulation board, 1/2 inch, and some stretchy black fabric of your choice. First thing I like to do is just remove this clear plastic here. It'll just make adhering everything a little easier. All right, you're gonna lay down that foam and put your crutch right on top of it. Now I usually like to make that design right to about here in the crutch, right before the foot. So you'll lay it down. Now you can be a little bit creative with this. Now I have a very specific shape that I make usually, and I'll show you that right here. Something like that. And cut it out. Once you have that all cut out, you're gonna actually flip it so that it's facing the other direction. And try to save as much foam as you can. We'll need as much as we can for this. So you lay it down and then draw it out. Once you have that, cut that piece out as well. Now in the center portion on the inside of each side, I like to add a little bit of fabric just so that it's a little nicer on your arms and it makes less noise. So this is the approximate area that we're gonna cut out some fabric and glue it to it. Grab your piece of fabric and fold it in half so you won't have to cut twice. All right, now that you cut those two out, just take it apart and you just flip it over and it'll fit the other one perfectly. For this next part, I use Super 77 to adhere it to the foam. Make sure you spray both the fabric and the foam. I use a heat gun to make it go a little bit quicker. I'm gonna try again. And it doesn't have to be perfect. It's very hard to lay it down correctly when this is very tacky, but it doesn't have to be perfect. This is just a liner for your arm. Again, I highly recommend buying my How to Build a Spiritwalker guide on Etsy. It's going to show you how to build that if you don't have access to a 3D printer, and even if you do, it has really, really clear instructions on how to make it. So deansshop3d@gmail.com can print these for you, or you can buy these 3D designs at home right on my Etsy page. Link is going to be in the bio, and it's also on my profile. Next, we're going to make the spacing for the arms with the crutches. So you're going to set these down, and I usually like to have it just a smidge forward from the back of the form that you've made. You're going to line that up with the bottom. All right, so I have that all lined up. Now there's two different ways we can do this. The first way is cutting apart a bunch of pieces of the foam, the insulation, and stacking them up and making a spacer using zip ties. Now I show you exactly how to do that in my guide on Etsy. However, we're gonna actually be using Dean's Shop 3D print. He's printed up a bunch of spacers. Now I have these spacers available for you on my Etsy as well. Now with the crutches, we're gonna have to take them apart. There's a rivet here that you'll need to drill out, so let's do that real quick. It's gonna be there now. You can tell I've drilled out a few rivets. Pop off the top of the crutch. All right, we're gonna put on the spacers in this order. The small one, make sure that's facing out, and then the large one facing out. Same thing with the other side, facing out, and this will all make sense in a few minutes once we get this together. Once you have these 3 spacers on there, you're gonna need to put the armpit holster back on, make sure it's all the way on, and then either you're gonna bolt this or you're gonna rivet it. I'm just gonna rivet it. You can get a rivet gun at Harbor Freight really cheap. I usually buy these nice assortment kits because you never know when you're gonna need to use a rivet. All right, so next I found that this foam is very, very weak. I've had to go through many different renditions with the original Spiritwalker. So on the back side, we're actually gonna be putting one of those pieces of scrap aluminum across it. So we have to mark the distance on this aluminum to drill holes so it's almost like a large washer on the other side. But this is a good time to get some help so you can hold it in place. This is Dusty. Dusty's been in a ton of my videos. He helps me all the time. Especially with these builds, he's been helping a whole bunch. So Dusty, if you want to hold that in place for me, line up the bottom with that spot I talked about earlier. Once those are nice and flush and flat, go ahead and mark it and drill that out. With that piece of aluminum you just drilled out, you're gonna line it up, and this is so that we can make holes through it and add some bolts. Screwdriver, and push holes in. And take that piece of aluminum and take some bolts from that bolt assortment. Make sure they're about 1.25 inches long so that you can get through the foam and the supports. You're gonna take this and push it through. This is gonna act as a giant washer so that this doesn't break or fall apart or crack as you're using it. Just one of the small things that I've learned throughout my years wearing a Spiritwalker costume. You're gonna want them completely at the top and push those onto the bolts. Now that you have those on there, put a washer, and you don't really have to worry about a lock washer because we're actually gonna super glue this afterwards. And tighten it down. With that extra scrap aluminum, I like to use aluminum just because it's a lot bigger than a washer. You're gonna cut out a piece about this big with the hole in the center. All right, so the mid-crutch support, you're gonna figure out where it's gonna be landing, and yes, it's gonna lift up, the foam will lift up a little bit. And poke a hole just like we did before. Okay, and with those same bolts, we're gonna put this underneath and use that as a washer to put it together. So if you don't have access to something to cut that aluminum with, you can use just zip ties and zip tie everything on. The bottom of the foam does also need to be connected. So again, with that scrap aluminum, use these holes that are already made in these crutches. Mark 2 holes. I use 2-inch bolts for this so it can get through the foam and the crutch. All right, cool. So now we are actually going to be covering this all with fabric. It's going to be really hard to get to any of these bolts. You can either use a lock washer or you can use thin set super glue. Now Starbond sent me a whole kit of different types of super glues and epoxies and different amazing adhesives, and I found they're very amazing for doing exactly what we need. So I've got their thin set right here with a very nice precise tip on it. And so what I'll do is actually come right here and just put a dab of that. This will lock the threads in place you don't have access to a 3D printer to make those supports, this is how I've originally done it. Piece of foam, you just cut out pieces of foam like this, and then cutting them multiple times. But I've taken this, glued these together, and pressed these in here, but I've used spacers just like this. Using these is a lot stronger and a lot safer. It's gonna last a lot longer. You can use just cut pieces of foam glued together. All right, so now you have the spacing correct for the Spiritwalker arm. Do the same thing to the other one, and now you can try it out. So there we have it. We have a Spiritwalker arm. Now that you've finished the spacing on both of the arms, you can actually try on the stilts. And make sure, guys, if you haven't already, like this video and subscribe. It really means a lot to me, and it makes this all possible. Ready? Well, in front of you, stand up, and boom. At this stage, you can actually start to practice with it. Let's get out there and give it a shot, and good luck building your Spiritwalker.